think we'll get this show on the road. I am David Bloom. I am a writer, sometimes with my name on it, sometimes not. I write a column weekly for Tube Filter and another one weekly for a site called TV Rev, as in Revolution. And a lot of stuff that probably is best not to have my name on it. We have a distinguished panel here of people who are creating really cool, interesting VR projects in and around Hollywood and beyond about space and space exploration. And none of them is wearing their Space Cadet hat, dismayingly today, though I certainly wish they would have. I'll let each of them introduce themselves, beginning with Christian to my immediate right.
Yes, I'm Christian Lorison.
And please speak directly into the mic. Pull it up, because we have a huge audience at home watching and playing along.
So I'm Christian Lorison, and I'm a creative director at Loot Interactive. Been an artist, and been an artist in the game industry for a long time, and now we're doing VR and stuff like that, and it's very exciting.
I'm Danilo Moura. I'm co-founder of Loot Interactive and head of creative service with my partner in crime, Christian. We have been together for almost 9 years now, building a lot of cool experiences. We built up the Buzz Aldrin Space Cycling Pathways to Mars. We are building an Apollo 11 museum, and also a Harold Lloyd Museum that we're going to release pretty soon.
My name is Kalen Ray. I'm a lead experience designer at Magnopus. I come from the visual effects industry, where I worked there as an animator for about 7 years and transitioned into VR about 2 years ago.
Hi, my name is David Karlak, and I am a director at RSA Films and the director of Alien Covenant in Utero.
And I'm Jen Dennis. I'm the head of VR at RSA Films, and I executive produced In Utero.
All right, we'll speak up. We didn't get that. One more time. Turn off your damn phone.
Lori, I said, Jen. You know me. I work in the next office. Remember me?
Someone's going to pay. That's all I'm saying. So, Jen, let's try that again, because you were so rudely interrupted by your own people. Betrayed.
I think you all got it. Head of VR at RSA, and I worked with David. I executive produced In Utero.
Jen, pull your mic toward you. It's much easier that way, instead of sprawling.
Shall I do it for a third time?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
In rhyme.
So you can see these guys are pretty sharp. We've got three really main projects here. We've got one about Buzz Aldrin and a little bit about the moon, where he's going there, but talking about how we can get to Mars, Buzz Aldrin, second man on the moon, and still chugging along at 87 or something like that. We've got something about the International Space Station, very cool, and we've got something about unfriendly aliens coming to visit us from afar. Let's start with the alien thing, since you guys had a little movie come out this last weekend. I heard it did okay. A lot of goop involved, but on the virtual side, you all created a conversation with the director, Ridley Scott, is that correct? But tell us about the VR component that you all created as part of the broader marketing and other stuff around Alien Covenant.
Well, I would start by saying that obviously Ridley's very involved in the marketing of his films. If anybody goes back and looks at things like Prometheus, he became one of the first advocates of creating online digital formatted content outside of just creating a trailer and a poster and a whatever. So we actually have a division of RSA called 3AM, and they did the marketing for both Martian and now for Alien Covenant. And so this whole process of creating what we came out with here was born out of that strategy through 3AM.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, when I was involved, the whole idea of, having this scene in the film, but portrayed from the alien's perspective, that was already sort of...
It humanized the alien, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
you felt more connected to it.
Yeah, absolutely. That whole sort of concept just came out of the bunker, which was what, the Fox Innovation Lab, term.
There's literally a place at Fox Studios called the Bunker. It's actually not even in the Innovation Lab. It's literally, it sounds glamorous, like it's a joke, but it's literally a bunker downstairs in a room. And this was all born out of a conversation where the original idea was to be a fly on the wall in a scene from the film and shoot it practically, actually. And then somebody came up with the idea in the room. Actually, one of the execs said, "Well, what if you could be the alien?" And that's when this whole
Many
in-video
aliens
concept.
are often confused as executives of movie studios, so.
His name's Ted Galliano.
Yes,
Feel free to call him.
yeah. So he kind of looks like an exomorph. I didn't want to say anything, but on a bad day.
Yeah, and so when I became involved with the project, I was given a one-page sort of like Excel spreadsheet from 3 a.m. It sort of had like the different beats, you know, for this idea, and then it was then my sort of task to give a take on that material and to put together a whole visual presentation. And I pitched it to the studio, and they loved the whole approach, and then we just ran with it.
So you had, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this, do it however you will, and then you came back with that.
It's a little bit more complex than that. If it's interesting, if it's not, everybody just simultaneously fall asleep. Originally, we were going to shoot it, as I said, practically on the set, and I think when we decided that we were going to do this as a POV from the alien, that became less important. So we did sort of like what you guys did. We did full scans of the set, as well as photogrammetry, and created the assets then through that workflow. So it wasn't necessarily just that's when it came to David, and he then, sort of put that spin on how he wanted to make that happen.
Great. How did this fit into the broader Ridley Scott vision? Did he speak at all about this with you guys, about how, thinking about the aliens' feelings and all this, how did that fit in?
I mean, from the very beginning, Ridley Scott was involved. Just the very fact that he allowed such a project to happen as part of the marketing for his film is just a testament to, the fact that, like, bold ideas are the ones that kind of cut through the noise. And so, once we started embarking on this journey of bringing this piece to life, we met with Ridley, multiple times as the iteration process kind of progressed. And I would just ask him questions, does the neomorph have a heartbeat? How quickly does it gestate? And a lot of it was just sort of up to us to invent, but we would always go back to Ridley to make sure that it kind of fit within the canon.
That's what I'm sort of wondering, because, Alien's not exactly Star Wars in terms of having an extraordinarily developed canon, but it's got a few films under its belt now, and a man who's got a very specific sense of that world that he created. So it's not like you've got a Bible here in this quite the same way that Star Wars does.
It was just a collaborative effort. I mean, it was showing things to Ridley and then having him approve them, basically.
And, in his mind, trust me, I think that from all of our conversations with him, he knows exactly what he sees this as. So the canon is maybe more slightly on the celluloid and slightly in his head.
Okay. All right.
It's interesting.
Let's talk about real world here. Kaylin, the ISS project is actually, the ISS has been floating around us for 15 or 20 years now, I guess, some piece of it.
Yeah.
What were you hoping to achieve in the piece that you created, and where is that being seen? Where can you see that?
You could see it on Oculus.
On Oculus?
Yes, it's
only on
Oculus exclusive, yeah.
All right. And is that because that's who paid you?
Yes.
That would make sense why it's exclusive. So you're only on Oculus, so that means, what, 75 people can see this, roughly?
76.
76, I think. Your mom just bought one because, yeah.
Because she wanted to see what she buys everything I make. So.
That's great. That's what moms are for. Unfortunately, all my stuff's free, so mother doesn't buy it. But so you created the ISS. And what was the germination of this? I mean, it's been up there, as I said, and sort of slowly growing for quite a long time.
The germination of it was our company is owned by Ben Grossman, who's a fanatic about everything space. And so when we get something about space and we figure that we want to do something with it, then he goes crazy with a million ideas of what exactly we want to do. Are we going to put a camera up on the International Space Station? Are we going to put a user up in the International Space Station? Are we going to coordinate with NASA about this, or is this going to be a game that we're just going to do whatever we want and have total creative freedom? We just kind of put a bunch of ideas out there to see what was going to stick. We came up with a cool one, and Oculus was down with it, NASA was down with it, so we coordinated to do it. I think the most important part and why I was so happy with that we did what we did is that the point was to put somebody on the ISS. And like you said, it's been up there 15, 20 years, whatever, 100 years. I don't know exactly
like
how long
100
it's been
years,
up
yeah.
there. Probably not 100.
In space
but
years, it was 100 years in relativistic
yeah,
time.
exactly.
So.
Well, it's weird because you learn so much about the ISS when you're working on something like this, but exactly how long it's been up there, I still have no idea.
It didn't come up, right?
Yeah,
right.
I'm sure at some point it wasn't up there.
It is true, actually, that Galileo looked to the stars, did not see the International Space
Exactly.
Station up there
Yeah.
when he was looking up there and getting in trouble with the Catholic
Right, right.
authorities.
Yeah, it's almost like, we went to the moon, now let's go to Mars. Like, well, let's stay around.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
stick around.
But that was kind of the thing. It was we have all of this super high creative stuff that's going on in space. All these video games that you could do, all the VR experiences you could do. Those are great. I love them. But we don't have anything that's based in super ultra current reality. And I think that there's a difference between getting somebody excited about space and getting somebody inspired about space. And how you can inspire somebody about space is to show them what we're actually doing right now. So when you get into the app, you see real scientists, and they're talking about what this piece does. This is how we poo. This is how we exercise. This is how we do experiments.
Did they say this is how we poo?
Yeah.
Is that
Well,
the scientific
they
term
probably
for?
said excrement or something like that. But scientists are a lot more
But
chill
that
than
question
you would
comes
think.
all the time.
Oh,
that you
yeah,
put kids in the
because-
room.
yeah.
Okay, you
But I
go
mean,
there.
It's
how do
something
you
we
do it?
share with.
If you
yeah.
watch some of the Let's Plays, you'll see that some people are really excited about the pooing place in the ISS. It's
Yeah,
really
I'm sure they
exciting.
are. That's great.
And, attention to detail, we had to put it in there.
So it's really the more than a bird's eye view of being in there, what it's like, and all that experience. But you all had to sort of deconstruct all that to be able to create the piece. And how long is it?
The experience?
Yeah,
The guided experience could be 10, 15 minutes, but it's also open exploration.
Yeah.
So you can go outside. The centerpiece of it is the ISS itself. And so we have the entire ISS in there. The interior, we have everything is accessible except for the Russian side. Because
That's how Russians are.
As much as humans cooperate to like build a thing like that, like the businesses that represent us are still not happy about things like that. So, but you can go on the exterior and do a spacewalk over the entire thing.
And
So
you can spy on the Russians.
you could, and then you can figure out what they're up to.
kind of
yeah.
hack their systems.
Their system, yes.
It's like
Discovered that
it's like
that they're
payback.
the ones with the xenomorphs.
They're the ones with the
Yeah.
xenomorphs. Okay. So Danilo and Christian, talk about how you got into bicycling with Buzz Aldrin to Mars.
Okay. Yeah. So we started working with Buzz Aldrin and his institute on creating the cycling pathways to Mars, and so that was really interesting. It was fascinating to start working on, and
But how did you guys connect? Were you like just out? Was it
no,
like a Tinder date, or what was it? I mean,
It was
how
like
did
a
you connect?
script, hey, this is what Buzz Aldrin is going to say. Actually, it was already recorded. They gave us like, hey, this is what he said. Now we want to make it, all the illustrations so people can understand the
So
whole
he was
complexity.
recorded in some setting where, because he pops up throughout the 10-minute experience in several different things, like a hologram.
Yes.
So you already had that sort of hologrammatic kind of Buzz
Yes,
being Buzz.
right,
You had to
so
wrap
the-
stuff around it.
yeah, the
we-
volumetric video was already captured and stuff like that. So everything was
By you
laid-
guys, or just some
that
random
was
guy
eight-
walking by with a
that
volumetric
was
camera?
8i.
So the whole story is we
8i,
got
yeah.
like a call from Scott Barber and say, hey, there's a project that he knows that I would like to fist bump with you because we are space geeks. We have done a lot of stuff with like space shuttle launches, live broadcasting. You could watch with your friends. A lot of good things like related to NASA. We're all space geeks. And Scott told us, hey, 8i wants to put together a project with Time Inc., through their platform Live VR, to tell the story of, this machine that Buzz Aldrin created to take humans to Mars. And they want you to be with Buzz at the moon, at the Sea of Tranquility landing site. Then in the south pole of the moon, where they would extract the resources to power this incredible machine that takes humans to Mars. And before you get there, you have, the moon, the Mars moon, Phobos, that you stop. And we were just like, okay, we kind of like are space geeks, but it's really hard for us to understand. So even us took like a few days to try to map it out, even how we would put together this whole plan. And then we came back and said, that's months of work. We had, I think, a few weeks before VR on the lot, one event that happened organized by the VR Society. And it was like, okay, I love the idea, but I don't think we can do that in 5 weeks. So by VR on the lot, we showed something, and then we planned for South by Southwest to have the full day view. Buzz was there, and Buzz was also through the whole process with multiple people also from the Buzz Aldrin Space Institute, helping us to make sure that everything was accurate. So that's the part of the fist bump. You know, we're always trying to make things as realistic as possible, to the point that they asked us, why you're asking so specific questions about the materials and the way things, you know, will be built? It was like, well, because we are building it for real in a virtual environment, so we need to know precise dimensions, precise materials, how the whole thing will work.
So you all were totally geeking out. You had no phobia about phobos, as it were. In terms of, so you were actually, so it had to be like, it's the space ice in the South Pole. So we didn't get into the South Pole, but we knew that there was a crater where there's the sun, literally the sun never shines, where you can harvest the ice that you can turn into the hydrogen that they can
It's
do
the
stuff.
Shackleton crater. We went like that geek into to find out precisely which craters would be. They did amazing research with the Purdue University and putting this whole plan together to really take it to the administration. Cross the fingers that this will be greenlit.
Did you actually find out how old the space station is when you did all that
We
research?
did not talk about the space
I'm
station.
just asking because it could have come up. So
question stands.
you guys are free where? Your thing right now is free, available
It's
where?
free on Oculus and
On Oculus.
on Vive. Yeah,
On
you can
Vive.
You can go to the Steam store and just download it for free.
All right, so, and yours is,
Oculus.
but Oculus, but free, costs money?
Yes, it's free. Sorry.
It's free also?
Yeah.
And you guys,
We're on all platforms.
you're on all
I
platforms?
mean, even Facebook 360. I think we're at like,
Little Star.
yeah, everything. Yeah.
Little Star, I'm sorry, what?
The main publisher is Time Magazine
Time Inc.,
through
okay.
Live VR. So you
Okay.
can also, on your Android and your iPhone, just look for Live VR and you can download.
Okay.
You can watch it in 360 video.
So I'm curious about all this in terms of, obviously there's a great deal of interest and appetite for space-related stuff, whether it's horror fiction or real world, real world, or speculative real world, future-looking stuff. But none of you's free. I mean, none of you's charging anything, making any money out of this, right? So one of the questions I have is, you know, how did you pick your platforms? Obviously, Kayla and you guys picked it because they said, we're going to give you money.
Yeah.
How did you guys pick yours?
we were contracted to build it.
But
So-
specifically for those
for
two,
distribution, yeah. So-
but for those two sites.
Yeah, I feel like what is happening is that life is really, at our time, is really trying to push a lot of people to understand the potential of VR and the multiple stories. They also have like Pearl Harbor and a bunch of other amazing stories that you can go and be educated. So
Right.
I think that's very fascinating.
They're building
And
a library.
And they are building that library so people get used to, oh, I'll be coming back there because there's an amazing platform for me to just not try to monetize or, you know, be advertised, to really learn something.
Right. I mean, I think one of the issues, I may have talked to you guys, and I wrote a piece last week about this for Tube Filter, talking about some of the challenges that entertainment-oriented, which includes everything that each of you guys are doing. One of the challenges that the VR Society president talked about in a speech about 10 days ago was the challenge of discovering good stuff. You know, there's no Rotten Tomatoes reviewing it. There's no centralized iTunes store selling it or making it available. It's sort of sprinkled across the planet, the virtual planet. You guys are all creators, though. So how does that those sort of challenges, how does that affect what you think about for your projects now and for the next thing that you may do? Are you just hunting for the HTC money or the Fox money to market the next project that Ridley's doing, or how is this all working in terms of where you go next beyond these three cool projects?
I think it's a little unfortunate. I think you're right. It's hard to really create an industry that is going to be successful in terms of exploring VR and creating a space that's safe for large content creators and also independent content creators if there is no place where there's like a centralized, like the IMDb version of it or something like that, or like the Rotten Tomatoes version of it. It's still a bit scattered and intentionally divided in some places. And I like Steam. I'm a fan of Steam. I made like a little tiny game, and I put it up there myself because I'm a fan of that platform.
You were just letting off steam, I
was
when you
letting
made the game.
I was letting on steam.
Letting
Steam
on
does
steam.
have, you
Yeah.
know, a reviewing system, and
Yeah.
we're actually very positive on the Buzz Aldrin piece. I think it's 93% people did like super thumbs up. So there is a way for you to figure out before you
Within
buy
the
it.
Steam world, yeah.
Within the
absolutely.
Steam, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
if
there's
you're
no
not-
Rotten Tomato across multiple
Right,
platforms.
right. So let's circle back, Jen and David. In terms of the storytelling, how did the platform shape the story? In terms of, and one of the things I find interesting, when it's real world stuff, you're kind of contained within the real world, and you're saying, we're going to give you a little walk through it, but then we're going to let you explore. That makes perfect sense to me. You guys didn't have that, so how do you pull somebody through that experience in a VR space?
Yeah, I mean, from the very beginning, In Utero was engineered to reach as many people as humanly possible.
Or inhumanly possible, actually.
Or inhumanly possible. You know, within the VR community itself, I mean, I feel like a lot of people who work in VR start to take it for granted, when the reality is that there are millions or billions of people that haven't even tried a spherical video experience yet.
Yeah, billions
So-
is actually the word. There's 7.5 billion.
And so we just decided to make it as, you know, as sort of, you know, widely appealing as possible. And so the decision was made really at the studio level to make it a spherical experience, short, that could be ingested on all platforms. And so knowing that that was the box we were working within, then the next sort of goal was to then sort of like, you know, graze the glass ceiling of sorts, you know, because with spherical video, you're limited by a lot of sort of hardware limitations, right? Interocular distance, you know, stitching, how close you can put things to the camera, and knowing that, you know, we're starting in a very confined space, and then, you know, as the experience progresses, we're growing as a neomorph. You know, we had to animate the interocular distance for the stereo, so we decided to do the whole thing CG, and bake it out to video, but from a CG workflow. And it just gave us the best quality for stereo, and gave us a flexibility to really sort of like nail those story beats, you know, throughout the experience. And then, you know, with that, we were able to launch it on Facebook, on YouTube, really high quality stereo on the Vive, streaming platforms, and you know, we even have a master at 10K. So you know, once headsets can support those high resolutions, it might even have a second win down the road. And now we're, you know, like, you know, seeing how, you know, we can maybe take, you know, CG elements like that and maybe even do like a volumetric output as well.
So you've got it mastered at 10K, really?
Yeah, actually, it might be higher than that. Yeah,
It's so big you can't even tell how many K it
yeah, I
is.
mean, it was 500,000 render hours for all the layers because everything was computer generated. The blood, the tissue, the characters, the environment. Yeah, everything. And when you're working in VR, you can't use compositing tricks like you can use on a 2D flatty project. You have to basically, you know, try to get it in the render as much as you can. So it was just a monumental task.
So you're hoping someday there'll be a machine that will actually let you take that 10K thing and do something with it because it's so freaking
Yeah, absolutely.
huge.
Yeah. I mean, these headsets are going to get higher in resolution. I think we're just sort of...
The headsets need to get like to 10K per eye.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it will feel like you're actually there.
And that's what I'm talking about, 10K per eye. Yeah.
Or foveated rendering.
Wow. That's kind of crazy, but I mean, I guess part of the challenge you guys face, I mean, particularly creating stuff about space, is future-proofing your own projects, right? I mean, you kind of want to make sure it does have a life 3 years from now and doesn't look like a dot matrix printer or a fax machine in sort of, you know, virtual reality resolution terms.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the best way to do that is by working with the best data possible. So with In Utero, we used the assets from the movie. So all of the assets that were used in the film from MPC London were used for the VR experience. So those are, you know, the super high-res digital doubles, the med bay was a digital asset from the film. And then, you know, just having a really great springboard to work from allows you to have that longevity. I know you guys use CAD data for the ISS. So,
Yeah.
you know, like down the road, if you guys want to do like a higher res output, you can because you have the data sets.
Yeah, we could. The closer you can get to using the exact model, the cooler everything's going to be. But generating collisions based on all that stuff. I know if you're talking about stitching a 360 video, it's a little bit different from doing an immersive 3D experience. But if you want to do collision for every single possible surface, that's a very, very heavy calculation to do in real time. But that's not to say we won't eventually get to that point.
It's calculations for the future.
Yep.
How did you, I get you had the CAD-CAM plans to be able for most of the stuff, but again, the Russians were not big on sharing. They missed that class in kindergarten in Russia. So how did you work around that? And can we still go in there and I don't know, do bad things or something? I mean, you
can't go in there. It's like blocked off.
Blocked off.
We invented a door.
You invented a door?
We invented a door. Yeah, it's very tragic. It's the door.
It looks like the Berlin Wall, right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So could you like go around and spacewalk and look through a porthole?
You could, yeah, but there aren't any windows on that side. So the cool thing is you've got the cupola, that's the place where you want to go and hang out anyway. You know what I'm talking about, right? The cupola.
Yeah.
That's the cool part of the ISS where the astronauts go
It's
and
the
hang
cool
out.
pulla.
The cool pulla. Yeah.
Say
and
that.
you've got that, and then there's another small window on the ISS. But the cupola is the cool place, and we got that, so we're pretty happy.
All right. So you don't feel like you're missing out by not having Russian
I don't.
cooperation?
Yeah, but and the funny thing is, like, they do actually have tours. Like the ESA has gone and done a tour of the Russian side, but not NASA. I don't know what their relationship is. I don't want to strain it, so maybe
You don't want to make it
stop talking
worse.
about-
That's very international of you.
That's where they keep the aliens,
Yeah, the ESA is allowed to know, but we're not.
Would you? I'm curious, but if they like added another component to it, would you? Is this a living project, or just kind of it's up there, it's
Yeah.
done, and or
No, it's
how would
alive.
that work?
Yeah, it's alive.
Okay, because I was interested in part of what the Aldrin project shows. This really interesting technologies about the cycling, which is really essentially permanently orbiting things that kind of cycle between Mars and Earth, and two of them, so that you've got people not hitting, but arriving at Mars every year or so, I guess.
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
Yeah.
So they have two, so
They
you
have
can
two,
go
so it's every
year.
other year by the time when you get them both up and rolling.
Well, actually, it's 4 years, so every
Oh.
other year it comes, one cycle comes by, but there's two cyclers in orbit.
Okay.
And the idea is that you have landers that jump onto that,
Right.
and then you can
Right.
basically get
They
get people-
piggyback up
Yeah.
and back.
And they can land on
Yeah.
So do you see that project as something that is a finished and you're moving on to the next thing, or does that have life if something like what Buzz's vision has opportunities going forward? Is that something you would do more with, or is like, okay, we're done, we're moving on?
No, I mean, if something happens and then things are moving forward, I mean, totally would make sense to
To
continue.
detail
and
more.
There's a lot of
There's a
details.
lot of-
Yeah.
There's a lot of details that we just couldn't put it in 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So what were the challenges about, you had some volumetric capture of one aging astronaut in his typical, he's a fairly interesting fellow in
Yeah,
many, many
amazing
ways.
guy.
But you had that video. What were the challenges of sort of building up around that? I mean, I saw you had the Apollo 11 lander in one scene, and guys off collecting rocks, and then you have the stuff you're doing with the fly-throughs through the solar system and all that. So what were the challenges in creating this space?
I think the challenges were, first of all, it's the VR, so it's a new way of actually visualizing things. It's not like, storyboarding with it's two-dimensional. So a lot of times what I would do, for example, I would be closing my eyes and actually imagine things and kind of compose things through that. And it's a new way of composing images, basically, because you're dealing with dimensions, you're dealing with spatial dimensions around you and stuff like that. So that's sort of what we did, and then I would just kind of sketch it down. But a big part is also actually fleshing it out in VR and quickly throwing it into the world so you actually can react to it, because that's a big part. It's like you can visualize something, you can have an idea, right? But once you try it in VR, sometimes it doesn't work. So I would throw back and forth, do a quick model, and just pull the camera, and sometimes actually in VR I would move around to get the right angles and stuff like that. So VR is very different in that way.
Yeah, and that was on the creative side. On the storytelling part of it, one of the things that we wanted to do is to be able to experience his whole vision without being distracted, being as informative as possible. So we did like a nice trick that you have 11 different scenes that he takes you through, like, you know, South Pole of the Moon, the landing site of the Apollo 11, you go to Mars, and all these other scenes. So each one of those scenes, you actually go through it without experiencing a loading screen. So for us, that was like a big deal. So you could actually focus on something that is already hard to understand, and we kind of like bootstrap this whole scenes together so you can actually just focus. But at the same time, we're dealing with a lot of heavy assets. So you have volumetric video, you have a lot of realistic looking scenes. We use a technology called Photogrammetry that use a lot of photos to actually create those objects as real as possible. We sent like photographers to Morocco to shoot surface that, you know, that's where NASA tests the rovers. So we could have like very high quality close to you. But at the same time, we got topography from Mars and from Moon to make everything, you know, as real as possible.
You got actual data for this is what the
Everything.
service. Okay.
Everything that we did, both for the Apollo 11 landing site, for the Mars scene, was like recreated like as realistic as possible. It's only close to the user that we use, you know, pictures from. I think it's on area 12 hours from when you arrive in Morocco to drive inland to find that, you know, like the dry surface. That's where they test the rovers. They say, like, hey, if you really want something as close to that, you know, use that as a resource.
So that's not actually Mars. That's Morocco Mars.
That's really close to
Mars
you. So you
Occo.
have a 15 by 15 feet area
Yeah.
that you can walk around.
Yeah.
We didn't have enough resolution on the pictures from the rovers, and they usually most of the pictures are black and white, and we wanted to have, you know, something that looked as realistic as possible. Right. So for the textures close to you, those were the pictures, but for all the topography in the location where they would land on Mars, that was actually using real data from NASA.
I have to say that I was interested in both the mining area and then the representation of what a Mars colony would look like. They each sort of felt like actually stuff that I saw from Ridley Scott's stuff. I mean, it's like the vehicles looked kind of alien, you know, from the Martian, for instance, and stuff like that. I mean, it's like, where were those things that you got from NASA about that's what they're thinking about, these six-wheel big things, or was that stuff that you were inspired by from some of the fictional things that are going on, or where did that come from?
So the whole research that Buzz did with the Purdue University, right, they actually went through all of the details of the blueprint of how all of those things would be built.
Okay.
So that was really where most of those, you know, drawings came from.
Yeah, I mean, we were mostly focusing on the cyclers and stuff like that, and then after that, it was the habitats, which would actually, the idea was that they would be built by robots on the moon to sort of simulate what would have happened later on Mars. So that was our main focus. Some of the vehicles, I believe we found them somewhere or something like that. But there are actually vehicles from some, you know, early prototypes from NASA and stuff like that. So.
Okay.
Yeah, some of the elements, they had some freedom too, you know, for the rover, for example.
Okay. So I can't remember, Jen and David, one of you guys also worked on the Martian project. It was Jen. Great.
Yeah.
So we're going to get 2 for 1 out of you on this one. So tell me a little bit about, since the Martian fictional telling of an astronaut left behind by accident and doing the hard science to survive, you all had a movie based on a best-selling book. The movie did great. And then you did a 15-minute VR experience. Is that right?
It was, it depended on how long you wanted to dork around, to be honest. You could drive, if you wanted to, you could drive the rover around for 25 minutes. So if you just did it
That's pretty dorky, I
consecutively,
got to admit. So,
and if you there's no dye in Martian, so if it takes you forever to get the solar panels, eventually it'll clock you out. So it's anywhere between 15 and 25 minutes.
Okay.
You know, how you-
So talk a little bit about that creation process. I mean, it came out after the movie had come out. And now I guess they're doing a TV show, is that right? A TV episodic thing based on The Martian? It's all about growing potatoes, I think, right? No.
I don't know.
Okay, I just knew that I thought it was supposed to be in between the movie and something else. But talk about sort of how that came about as a second tier of stuff after the movie. It wasn't a marketing
yeah.
thing for the movie.
Well, originally, again, sort of, we had pitched an idea to Fox to shoot something while they were shooting in Budapest, but long story short, they ended up not doing it and regretted it after the film was over, so we ended up having to sort of reverse engineer. So since we had the assets from the film and we didn't have anything we'd shot independent of that,
Much better.
we decided to do sort of a reenactment, a retelling, using the actual movie to stitch between sort of opportunities to do interactive VR. So
you-
a little reverse engineered.
Okay, a little reverse engineering, kind of like what Matt Damon's character
Yeah.
had to do, right? To
Yeah.
reverse engineer the living space.
And I just want to say something when you were talking about trying to be as accurate as possible. This is a true story. At one point, when we were doing sort of last looks on the rover and some of the exterior stuff, I had heard like, oh, there's these guys coming, and Ridley was there, and Robert Stromberg, who directed it. And so Ridley takes a look at everything. He's like, all right. And they're like, are the guys here? Then all of a sudden, 4 guys from JPL walked in to take a look at it to see. And Ridley'd be like, well, do you think that looks right? And they'd be like, well, that looks kind of right. They made adjustments based on JPL. So
Yeah, right. I chatted with a woman who does UX design for JPL, deals with rocket scientists every day. Just yesterday here at the conference, it was pretty entertaining. And her whole deal is trying to take their real data from the moon and Mars and create VR experiences so the researchers can walk around on it virtually on Mars and figure out where they want the rover to go next. So you had some JPL review.
scientists, literally scientists.
No rocket science. It isn't real rocket science. That's pretty cool. And that's a level of scrutiny that Star Wars never had to deal with.
No.
Well, they have their own levels of scrutiny that are
But
pretty
in
intense.
terms, just to go back to your question, in terms of that process, it was it was 2 years ago. I know that sounds like,
It's the ancient
nothing, but
history
in
in
VR, that's like 14 years.
That's
Because every
that's-
year
Yeah.
is 7 years. like a
Totally dog
years.
years. Totally
Totally
dog years.
dog
Yeah,
years.
it was like the DK2 era.
And it was totally Deco too. No, the hand controllers weren't even ready yet. I mean, it was
Yeah.
ridiculous. And we always jokingly called it like we were creating VR. It was like we were in an airplane. We were building it while we were flying.
Yeah.
So it was just a different now. And when you talk about longevity of that piece, I mean, I feel like there was not much that we could have done to give it having the forethought in utero to create it at 10K resolution so that we can future. There was just no way we could have done that with the Martian. It will be the Pac-Man of VR.
I think
Pac-Man
I
of
think
VR.
It really is hard to future-proof a
I
game.
think
because of
we should put that out on
technology.
social media. The
No,
Martian
don't-
will be
I'll
the
lose
Pac-Man.
my job. Don't.
She meant it in the best way possible because Pac-Man's still very
Pac-Man's
popular.
amazing.
Yeah. Actually, you really want to be the Ms. Pac-Man because I guess that was the better version. But
I'm giving it to Ridley. I'll be the Pac-Man.
yeah, you'll be the Pac-Man.
No check.
So were there challenges given the 2-year span of time? What were challenges in the Martian's creation, other than the retrofitting part of it, that you didn't have to deal with 2 years later? And what did the technology fix in the last 2 years? I'm trying to get some longitudinal vision
I
here.
think we kind of collided at the perfect time. Just as the Martian came out, the hand controllers were available. I mean, we were literally just so beta that just as we launched, the Oculus had come out, and and the commercial Vive, like all that stuff was just at the right sort of moment. So it sort of converged a little bit. We were a little earlier than PlayStation 4, but that was sort of the last one that.
Yeah, it was the last big one to roll out,
Yeah.
other than, I guess, Magic Leap, perhaps, whenever
Is that out yet?
whenever it takes the jump. So that brings me to another point. You guys worked on everything with the spherical. You did Vive. You did a couple platforms. What do you like? What's best, least painful, most interesting to work on from just a production and making stuff happen, but also making a cool thing?
I think we did a lot of different things. Like if you go 360 video, you have the stitching issues. You know, if you do just like a gaming experience, you have the collision issues. Like in our case, we had the volumetric piece. I don't think there's any way to be painless.
No, there's no, painless is not
It's
associated
like,
with
where
VR.
do you want it to hurt? you
Yeah,
know,
and I
but
think it's
still
also
gonna hurt.
Yeah, and I think
Where
it's
do you
also
want it
like
the
the
least?
combination. Like, well, actually, each one has its strengths and weaknesses. Like game engines have the idea that it's fully, you know, you can walk around, you can go anywhere and all that. But the problem is it's, you know, 3D models and stuff like that, and you have to worry about, you know, poly count and draw calls and all that stuff. Where if it's a video, you know, it can be super realistic, it can be movie quality, just awesome quality, but then you have the problem of you can't move around and the resolution and stuff like that.
Speaking about that, there's actually a new technology coming to Unity 2017, which is the old toy, where you have the Orbix format, that I think is going to be a nice way to merge the two.
So Unity's
yeah.
got, which I just saw, has got
It's
a,
old toys
yeah.
technology, and I feel like they're also going to put it on Unreal, but it's almost like a PDF, but for volumetric scenes. So instead of you being
PDF for
stuck into a
volumetric scenes.
bubble-
That makes my head kind of
So
explode.
instead of
Yeah,
just
okay.
to be stuck into a bubble, you can actually define, you know, an area that you can walk around. So
Okay. So it's
and
a,
then you can
it's a
have the
standard
realistic-
way of describing volumes.
Yeah, it's almost like the way you saw Buzz, right, as a volume, but now it's just an environment.
Okay.
So it's more data and it's much more difficult, and
we
I'm
had
looking
to
forward to seeing
optimize
it.
a lot, you know, on the scenes to just be able to achieve the 90 frames per second that VR needs. So we could actually go back and just render in this format, so hopefully it's not going to take too long to get into our hands, and have a version that would have the cinematic quality that we all want.
So that would be, the PDF for volumetric imaging is something that would allow it to work across platforms. So I think that's a fundamental challenge right now, is getting stuff across, because you just don't have the resources in most cases, unless you start from the lowest common denominator. You just don't have the resources to do it across a bunch of platforms, right? So you need some sort of common
Well, all the
backlink.
requirements for all these different platforms are wildly different as well.
Are they?
So, yeah, so it's definitely a hurdle to consider, you know, the cardboard version and the Gear version and the Rift and the Vive version all simultaneously. It's a big effort, so congratulations. If you're available everywhere, that's amazing.
I think it's always crazy that we have to sort of pick our poison at the beginning. Like, you know, I think we're working on a secondary piece for Alien that's going to be, you know, not like The Martian where we're regurgitating the same story, but it'll be a follow-up piece to the film. But, you know, we have to make the decision. Is it a seated experience or is it a volume room scale? And then once you're that, like, there's good things and bad things about each, and then you can't work that on that platform, on the Rift anymore as much. It's much more difficult. So it's too bad like the standardization hasn't happened yet, but we're such in infancy at this point that, you know, I get it that everybody's trying to figure out the best way to do it, but
Right.
You would ask which one is the easiest, or which one is the
least
preferable,
hideously
the
painful.
least hideous.
The
I
least
would-
like the Spanish Inquisition. How's that? You like
the
that?
least like the Spanish Inquisition. I would say Vive.
Fine.
yeah.
And they didn't
It's
pay you for
hands
that,
down,
which
and
is-
they didn't pay for that. I guess they don't pay for anything because we've asked.
Wow.
So noted.
So this is free. No, to me, VR is all about putting a user in a place, and it doesn't feel like you're in a place if the ground is not the ground. If the things in front of you are not touchable and movable and shakeable, if you can't go in there and break stuff, if you can't go in there and look at this thing now from that angle and whatever you want to do with it, then it's not really VR. VR, you have to be in there, and Vive, more so than anyone else right now, puts you in a place because it's all room scale. You are as tall as you are while you're wearing the headset. You don't have to calibrate anything. The floor is where the floor is, and your arms are tracked and your head is tracked. And of course, it's going to get better. You're going to get your feet, and you're going to get more your hips, whatever that we do with it in the future.
This is called embodiment, right?
What were we calling it? Like 2 years ago, this was like the buzzword. It was like presence.
Presence.
Presence. Yeah.
I think
We did have a guy that was in like Job Simulator for like an inappropriate amount of time, like 2 hours. Our art director was in there. And then when he left, he had been messing around in Job Simulator on some like like
What was
cooking or
what
something.
is Job Simulator? I'm sorry. Is it
It's
like
you'd
I
simulate
was like
jobs.
work but not work? It simulates work?
You go to work, you simulate.
This sounds
being
like
at
more
work.
fun than a barrel of monkeys. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
so a simulator of work. Do you
Yeah.
get paid for
But
simulated money?
It's all this like low poly.
Do you get a simulated
jobs.
vacation?
Unfortunately, no.
Yeah, it's kind of like
very
the
defeating.
2050s archive. It's kind of like you're in the future, and
Right.
the robots do everything. So you kind of like have to teach people how it was to be like a store clerk or
Okay,
an
here's
auto
how to be a
mechanic or
clerk
something.
again. Right,
Yeah,
okay.
but we had
It's
the we
by
had
far
the
my kid's favorite game.
It's a great game, but we had the Vive dev kit very early on, and our art director was spending hours in this job simulator cooking at like an imaginary stove. And when he was done, he took the headset off and tried to place it on the table that he had just been interacting with for hours that wasn't there and dropped it. This like priceless thing because nobody has it at the moment, and thankfully it didn't break. But
So he's, as most art directors are, a somewhat unusual individual.
somewhat unusual.
And
yeah.
only getting worse. So you like Vive. RSA people, what do you think? You did stuff everywhere. What's
I'm
the
a
best
platform
experience?
agnostic. I really don't care.
Oh, you're the United
To
Nations.
be honest, like,
Okay.
If you're asking
Um,
about taste, I would say that The
Yeah.
Void, if you guys have done The Void.
yeah, I mean, it's just like so.
Yeah,
it's
that's-
changing
that's
so.
actually the winner, yeah.
The best location-based experience where you can actually
Yeah.
touch the walls and you feel like you're
Yeah.
in an elevator
So yeah,
because they are
consumer-wise,
shaking the floor.
maybe Vive, but yeah, what you're talking about
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the ultimate VR experience.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was who again? I
The
didn't-
void.
The
The
Void.
Void.
The Void.
So you have
I think there's
like,
no disagreement about that.
It's really good
That
that the
one's like
space
the
guys are talking about the Void, I think. That's entirely appropriate. So the Void you like a lot.
Yeah,
because
it's a complete room scale experience where you
Location
it's
based.
not
Stage
just
set-
your
stage
room, it's
set
the
scale, right?
entire
Yeah.
place. You're tracked not with a couple of lighthouses or with two cameras next to your computer. You're tracked with like a proper OptiTrack system used for motion capture in video games and movies. And so it's like the size of a sound stage, and you can create the environment and map it one-to-one, so you can do real laser tag with a headset on your face and run around and shoot aliens.
And it's only $100 on the,
And it's
the Steam
yeah, it's only
store,
but
right?
that's the thing. It's not like a consumer. You have to go
Right.
to a place.
You have to go to
and
a
pay bunch
place.
of money. Yeah.
Okay.
But I also have to say they did an amazing thing with the Ghostbusters because the computer is in your back, so it's almost like they're suiting you up as a Ghostbusters.
Right, you've got the
And you
thing
have
that they do to suck
the
up all the
computer.
ectoplasm, right?
And you
So-
have the haptic sense.
Right.
So when Slimer is coming your way and passes through you, you actually feel like. And they also like spray some water on you, so you feel like you got slimed. I was like, dude, come on. It's just perfect. It's really, really well done.
Okay, so you get sprayed in the game. That's
So
great.
Ian, you were talking about
This
monetization.
is totally right. You guys need to be doing this on the next Alien thing.
Yeah,
You
but I
have,
mean,
like-
we're already thinking about it. Location-based VR is going to
it's
offer
where the
people
money
like.
is.
I mean, here's the thing: when you think about like movies, entertainment, you know, theater owners want to create a sense of urgency. Like you have to go to a theater to experience this new film, and that's becoming harder and harder on a flat screen. So you know, I feel like the future of VR is really going to be location-based. You
but
know,
maybe
where-
location-based in the theater's
yeah, like you
lobby
have to go to
kind
you
of
have to go to
thing.
an IMAX VR theater or a Void theater or Dreamscape. I mean, they're going to be everywhere. I mean, China's spending billions of dollars on location-based like VR cities that bullet trains will take you there directly, like right outside of Shenzhen.
It'll have
I mean,
3 million people in it, and you'll never have heard of it. That's
I mean, it's pretty remarkable. So, I mean, I just feel like that's really what's going to, you know, touch the third rail. You know, people are going to be immersed in these
Is that a
worlds.
good thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
touching the third rail.
Yeah, in
normally
VR
they
it
tell
In
is.
this
you-
context, yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like, I mean, that's really going to trigger the imagination in a way that we've seen only a hint of right now.
So really, you're saying, several of you.
It's going to
like
create
Jim,
that new sense of urgency. Like, I
Okay.
have to go to a theater to see this.
I got to see that
Because
so
I- 'cause I
the
can't store the data
location-based
sets.
experience
Yeah.
is really that full immersion thing is really, given the state of the technologies, that's where you really get into the VR-ness of it all.
Yeah, because I feel like when you're talking about platforms in general, like HTC or the Vive or whatever, I mean, really what the conversation should be is like, what are people's graphics cards, right?
Yeah.
Because like, you know, the optics
Exciting
and the headset,
conversations like
it's
that,
honestly
yeah.
like it doesn't matter. I mean, they're so like similar.
Right.
You know, so when we're just talking about VR in general, like there is a lowest common denominator where to get on the Oculus store, you have to meet you know, hardware minimum specs. Same thing on the PS, you know, 4.
PS4, right.
But that's going to be
VR.
nowhere near what theater location-based VR experiences are going to be able to offer.
Sure.
That's really where the future is. I mean, we're talking about VR, virtual reality, where the operative word is reality. You're only going to be able to have that at a location-based VR.
For
you
the
know, center.
foreseeable future, you're saying?
I mean, you can go to one right now in West Hollywood. I mean, these theaters are popping up,
I think it's
but
LA
I don't think
technically.
we're seeing the content that we will see. I mean, like, I feel like, don't you guys agree? Like, the content's kind of anemic,
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, I don't think we've actually seen like what Titanic of VR is going to be quite yet.
Right. There's
Yeah.
been no killer app. One of the people I talked with yesterday, who works for a very large hardware company, said there are launch apps and there are killer apps, and we haven't really seen either.
We haven't.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I mean, right now I think we're still sort of in the education phase. It's like very nascent and prosaic, and I just feel like somebody's going to create that experience that's going to have people lining up outside the theater to try it.
Yeah, but no one's lining up right now.
I mean, people are lining up. I mean, IMAX is opening up another space in New York. I mean, it's happening.
Yeah, they're going to roll it out, I think, as a strategy. Which makes sense for extending their
but I
brand.
feel like right now what the strategy should pivot towards is content, but being very audacious about it. Like, I want to see somebody spend $100 million on a VR experience. That's what I want to see. Build the market. Don't wait for it. Just build it, and people will come.
$100 million.
Yeah, I mean, if it's provocative enough and good, I mean, Disney spends $100 million on theme park rides. Why can't we spend $100 million on a VR experience?
That's true, but they can run 2,000 people through that ride in a day.
Yeah, you can do the same thing with VR, location-based. You can have pods. You can have people show up, pay. You have a ticketing system.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I want to see somebody, with the plums to do it.
With the plums, les off. I think we have a couple minutes left, and there's a very quick hand, and I'm thankful for her. Why don't you stand up, speak loud? I will repeat your question, and it will be a question, right? Not a.
I actually have 2 questions.
Let's start with the first one. We'll give you a follow-up.
I'll start with your.
Start with the first one.
Okay, the first one's nuts and bolts, and the second is storytelling.
First, just give me one right, real quick.
The Martian and Alien VR projects. If I can ask the question, how long, how much?
How long, how much for the 2 RSA projects, The Martian and Alien Covenant?
I can speak to Martian. The final budget was someplace over $3 million. And again, that took 4 to 6 months. But, that doesn't include ingestion and, then porting it to all the different, that has taken an additional 6 months to get it into every single
Six months
format.
to get it translated, more or less?
Translated, formatted. Remember, we were also working up against the launch of PlayStation, so that took months, whatever. But that's neither here nor there. And then in utero, actually, is about 500,000 to 600,000. And obviously, The Martian is a potentially 25-minute piece, and in utero is a 2-minute teaser. So they're very different.
And you also were
animals.
working backward on The Martian, and you were working
Yes.
using existing assets on the other one. So that, I'm sure, made a huge difference, right?
We used existing assets on utero as well. Like, as I said, we had all the photogrammetry and all the
Right.
So that's apples to apples. Actually, it was just a different process, and in a VFX pipeline, it's a little different, and you can't really compare the two, is what I'm saying.
Okay, and your second question, go ahead, sit up.
On storytelling, on The Martian,
Damn, The Martian. Sorry.
no, I love it. I'm curious, so I feel like you kind of cracked a little bit of a code there on how VR and movies can work together.
Yes.
So you have the script,
Yep.
and then how did you decide to make the centerpiece? Was it because it's a cathartic moment? Is it because you can feel being saved? Like, I was interested that you didn't have to have seen the movie, but it helped that you had seen, because at first I'm just doing a VR, but then I can hear the panic and feel the claustrophobia, but it took me a while to realize, oh, I'm Matt Damon. Like,
Interesting.
I looked down and I had space hands. I'm like, oh, I'm an astronaut. And then I realized I was Matt Damon, and then I realized, oh, I'm going to get saved, and then I realized, oh, I don't die. I'm going to make it. And so
Did you realize that
You know,
Jimmy Kimmel hates you? as Matt Damon. His secret love.
I was interested that even though it wasn't a person as the one who saves you, the cast crew member that saves you, I was interested that even playing and being rational and knowing I was in a pod chair, I put my arms out. Yes,
Everybody does.
I was and I couldn't wait to be caught, and I kind of felt like I was hooked, and I was like, what is going on?
I have to say, like,
So just real quickly, she eventually asked about the storytelling around The Martian in terms of cracking the code by focusing ultimately on a climactic moment from the movie in the VR experience. Is that fair? And how you arrived at that?
I think that actually, to be very honest, went back to the marketing of the film, which is, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but before the film even came out, there was this sort of digital meme that you could put your own face in, and it said something like, help save blah, blah, blah. But like the whole idea of the way the film marketing was working was about saving Matt Damon, saving what was his name in the movie?
Mark Watney?
Mark Watney, yes. So I think that ultimately became part of the campaign, and I think it just made sense then to actually be saved. And ironically, a lot of people do that as well, but I've actually had grown men be moved by the experience of being saved. It's crazy. And it's interesting that you say you didn't realize who you were. I think that goes to something we're all struggling with, which is when we're telling stories in VR, it's not a language that it's not like open on the scene, establish the place. Now, here's a character. When
And
you're
there's no
actually
cutscene back to your protagonist, right?
Oh, look, it's me.
Yeah,
So
right.
I think that we're still learning. Even, sometimes now when I show people in utero, I actually say to them, oh, by the way, you're the alien. And I never thought I'd have to do that, but people don't get that they're the alien. I'm shocked
Well, in the video
sometimes.
game space, we'll have a little training session to start our 100-hour experience of shooting each other. But that training session, you may look up and look in a mirror. It's like, oh, this is what I look like. Now I want to have different hair. Oh, I want to be a
Right.
different color. All that stuff. So maybe, actually, this would be fun. Styling the alien. You can have kind of a swept back look or, Gautier alien. Now that would kind of rock. Anybody else have questions out here? If not, we've got one. Stand up, sir. Speak loud.
Yeah, you spoke to location-based being the future. How, and maybe this isn't really your department, but how do you see that making money given the throughput of a longer experience is much less than, say, a ride at a theme park? Like, you're talking 3 to 25 minutes for good experiences.
How do you make money off of something that's a relatively short experience that maybe is hard to get out
I
there?
think you make the multiplayer, you make them so that you're running 4 to 6 people through an experience at the same time. I think that they're not 25 minutes, they're 8 to 10 minutes. I think that there's a way.
I think you use it as a ticketing system based on time.
Yeah.
So VR experiences that aren't really on a time limit. So if you want to spend 8 hours in it, then you spend maybe a couple $100, like what you would maybe spend at a theme park. If you go to Universal or Harry Potter World.
Alien World would not be like Harry Potter World. I'm just going to throw
Definitely
that
not.
out
Very
there.
similar.
No
Just in
butterbeer at
style.
Alien World.
Whew,
No,
that's a
I
whole
think
different
there's
experience.
a version of that location-based VR that is kind of like Westworld.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be the laser tag experience. You've got a team, I've got a team. We fight for 8 minutes, and then the experience is over. There is exactly what you're talking about, where you can just go in, and you're in this virtual world for X amount of time, and you can leave whenever you want to leave, and you pay based on how much time you spent there.
It's like going to a pool hall.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. But I mean, that depends on the people designing the game. If we stay in this very simplified framework of like Pong, then it might dry up. But if we kind of open that up and say, oh no, you can go in and this person can give you a quest, or there's this like arcing story that takes place over the course of a few months, and it depends on what users have gone over the course of the week to influence that story or something like that. There's a world of possibilities that we can create with location-based VR.
And each one of these experiences doesn't need a room this big. It can be
No.
a corner of this room, And there's been many studies that show that you can have somebody feel like they've walked through, the entire space station. They've never left a
Oh, right.
square this big.
Yeah.
It's just all about tricking your mind into thinking you're walking a straight line, but you're not.
Yeah, actually, I
So-
think Ghostbusters did that, where they have a
Yes.
slight curve to it, and in VR, you're actually seeing a straight hall, but you don't actually notice that you're actually going in a circle. So
They also have the trick of the elevator.
Absolutely.
That
Uh-huh.
they can reset the whole thing, and you feel like, oh, I'm on the second floor.
Yeah.
Well, you're not. You're still in the
Right.
same. You just like change a
Right.
few things around.
Lots is possible. We will need to wrap this up. Please come up and grab their business cards, bring yours, and then if we can adjourn off to the side, give everybody a big hand for being fantastic.